At first, everyone at the shelter thought it was a miracle. A rescued German shepherd, weak, trembling, and alone, had finally given birth. But when the vet rushed over to check on her, the room fell silent. The newborns weren't crying like puppies, and they didn't look like puppies either. One of the assistants gasped. What are those?" The vet's face turned pale as he leaned closer, his hand shaking. Something inside him knew this wasn't normal. The mother dog whimpered softly, her eyes pleading as if she was protecting something far more than just her litter. What the vet discovered next would shock everyone in the shelter and change the way they saw her forever. Stay till the end, because what he finds will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning sun filtered softly through the dusty windows of Haven Paws Animal Shelter, casting golden streaks across the tiled floor. The air carried that familiar mix of disinfectant and dog shampoo, with the gentle hum of ceiling fans breaking the silence. Volunteers moved about quietly, refilling water bowls, sweeping kennels, humming to themselves. It was the kind of peace that shelters rarely experienced, until one faint sound changed everything. From the corner pen, a low, weary whimper echoed. Inside, a German shepherd lay curled against a blanket, her fur slightly matted but her eyes alert and intelligent. She'd arrived only a week ago, pregnant, scared, and limping from a deep gash on her hind leg. No collar, no microchip, no name. But the shelter staff had quickly given her one. Grace. It fit her perfectly. There was a quiet dignity about her, even in pain. Head caretaker Maria knelt beside the pen, whispering softly, "Hey there, sweetheart. How are we feeling today?" Grace lifted her head slightly, her ears twitching at the familiar voice. Her eyes, deep brown and filled with exhaustion, seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. She didn't bark or growl, she just watched, cautious, patient, almost knowing. Outside her pen, the usual morning chatter had died down. Everyone knew Grace was close to giving birth. The shelter's vet, Dr. Harris, had been monitoring her carefully. "She's strong," he'd said, "but malnourished. We'll need to be ready when it happens." And so they waited. Every shift volunteer took turns keeping an eye on her, jotting notes in a small logbook by the pen. Resting but alert. Ate half her meal. Whimpering softly. But that morning, something about her seemed different. She wasn't eating. She wasn't sleeping either. Instead, her gaze stayed fixed on the window, ears flicking at every sound from outside as though she sensed something coming. Maria leaned closer and gently placed her hand on the bars. "It's okay, girl," she whispered. "You're safe here." Grace blinked slowly, lowering her head back onto her paws. But her breathing had changed, shallow, rhythmic, almost trembling. Maria's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. She called out softly, "Dr. Harris, I think it's time." The quiet morning at Haven Paws was about to turn into something unforgettable. By the time Grace arrived at Haven Paws, she was barely standing. A good Samaritan had found her near the edge of an abandoned warehouse district, mud-caked, trembling, and limping badly. When the man approached, Grace didn't growl or run. She simply looked at him with quiet resignation, as if she had been waiting for someone to find her. He wrapped her in his jacket and drove straight to the shelter, unaware that his small act of kindness would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. When Dr. Harris first examined her, he frowned. "She's been through something," he murmured, noting faint scars along her flank and a strange mark behind her ear, like a faded tattoo. Her pulse was weak, but her belly was swollen with life. "She's pregnant," he told Maria, "and very close to delivery." The news filled the shelter with cautious hope. A new life, maybe several, was on the way. But beneath that hope lingered an unease that no one could explain. Grace adjusted quickly to her new surroundings, but there was something haunting about her behavior. She rarely barked even when other dogs did. She avoided loud noises, flinching at metallic sounds or footsteps echoing through the hallway. Sometimes at night, volunteers reported hearing her pacing restlessly, whining softly, as though haunted by memories only she could feel. Maria spent hours sitting near her pen, reading softly from a book just to keep her company. "You're safe now," she would whisper. "No one's going to hurt you." And sometimes, when Maria's voice grew calm, Grace would finally lie down and rest her head on her paws. her breathing evening out in fragile peace. But Dr. Harris couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. He had treated hundreds of abandoned dogs before, yet none had left him so unsettled. The faded mark behind her ear bothered him. It wasn't a natural scar. It looks almost like an identification code, he thought, but quickly dismissed the idea. Who would mark a dog like that? As days passed, Grace grew stronger. Her coat regained some shine and her appetite returned, though she remained unusually watchful. Every time a stranger entered the shelter, her ears would perk, eyes sharp, studying every movement until the person left. It was as if she was guarding something precious, something far greater than anyone realized. And then, one quiet evening, Dr. Harris glanced into her pen and froze. Grace was lying completely still, her breathing deep and steady, but the air around her felt charged, tense. Her time was near. The mysterious dog with no past was about to bring a future no one could imagine. The night before had been unusually cold, the kind that made the shelter's old pipes groan softly. By morning, the chill had crept into every corner of Haven Paws. Maria arrived early, clutching her mug of coffee, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. When she reached Grace's pen, she stopped mid-step. The German Shepherd was restless, circling, pawing at her blanket, letting out low, uneasy whines that reverberated through the quiet space. "Dr. Harris," Maria called, her voice tight with urgency. Within moments, the vet appeared, his white coat half-buttoned, stethoscope swinging. He crouched beside the pen, his experienced eyes scanning Grace's movements. "She's going into labor," he said softly. "Everyone stay calm. Let's prepare the birthing station." The room shifted instantly from calm to controlled chaos. Volunteers hurried to sterilize equipment, warm fresh towels, and set up heat lamps. One of them fetched warm water while another laid soft blankets in the delivery pen. Grace trembled, her eyes darting between faces, uncertain and anxious. Maria knelt down beside her, whispering gently, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're not alone." Dr. Harris spoke calmly, keeping everyone focused. "She's been underweight. We might have complications. Stay ready for anything." The tone in his voice carried both authority and concern. He opened his medical kit, preparing oxygen masks and fluids just in case. Grace panted heavily, her sides heaving. Her tail twitched as she shifted her weight, searching for comfort. Every instinct in her body screamed that it was time. Maria's heart ached watching her. She could feel Grace's fear, but also her determination. Even in pain, the dog's eyes held fierce resolve, a mother's instinct to protect no matter what. Minutes stretched into an hour. The shelter grew silent except for the rhythmic sound of Grace's breathing and Dr. Harris's quiet instructions. Outside, the morning sunlight crept higher, spilling through the windows and bathing the room in soft gold. The volunteers exchanged worried glances. Something felt different. Grace let out a sharp yelp, a deep guttural sound that made everyone freeze. Then silence. The first pup was born. Maria exhaled shakily. "Good girl, Grace," she whispered. But the relief was short-lived. Grace didn't lick the newborn right away. Instead, she sniffed it cautiously, tilting her head as if confused. Dr. Harris leaned closer. "Strange," he murmured, but before he could finish, another contraction hit. One by one, more newborns arrived, each met with Grace's labored breaths and quiet whimpers. Within an hour, the floor of the pen was covered with tiny, shivering forms. Maria smiled through tears. "You did it, girl," she whispered. But Dr. Harris didn't smile. He adjusted his glasses, leaning in closer to inspect the litter. Something about the newborns caught his eye, something that didn't feel right. Their shapes, their color, even their silence. He looked up at Maria, his expression unreadable. "Keep everyone back," he said quietly. "I need to take a closer look." And just like that, the miracle birth began to feel more like a mystery. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound inside the shelter was the faint hum of the heater and Grace's shallow breathing. The newborns, at least 8 of them, lay huddled close to their mother, tiny and still. Normally, a chorus of soft squeaks would fill the room after a birth, but this time, there was nothing. No cries, no movement, only silence. Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Are they breathing?" she whispered. Dr. Harris didn't answer right away. He knelt beside the pen, his gloved hands trembling slightly as he reached toward the first newborn. Grace tensed immediately, a protective growl rumbling low in her throat. "Easy, girl," he murmured, pausing to meet her eyes. There was no aggression in her gaze, only fear. Reluctantly, she allowed him to continue. He lifted one of the newborns gently. Its body was warm, heartbeat steady, but the texture of its fur made him frown. It wasn't soft like a puppy's. It felt coarse, unusually thick, almost like velvet. And its color, dark gray, nearly charcoal, was unlike any German shepherd pup he'd ever seen. "Strange," he muttered under his breath. "They don't even look premature." Maria knelt beside him, peering closely. "Are they okay?" she asked. Dr. Harris hesitated. "They're alive. But something's off. Their breathing patterns are shallow, synchronized almost perfectly. Look, every inhale and exhale matches the others." He demonstrated, pointing at their tiny chests rising and falling in eerie unison. A chill ran down Maria's spine. "That's not normal, is it?" "No," he said quietly. "Not even close." The shelter volunteers stood frozen, uncertain what to do. One of them whispered, "Maybe it's just a rare breed." Another replied, "But she's a shepherd. How could her pups look like that?" Dr. Harris placed the newborn back beside its siblings, watching as Grace immediately nudged it with her nose, pulling it closer to her belly. Her maternal instincts were strong, protective, gentle, but her expression remained tense. She knew something was different, too. Outside, the world carried on as usual. Birds chirped. Cars passed by. But inside that small shelter room, time felt suspended. Every volunteer could feel it, the strange energy that seemed to linger around the pen. Dr. Harris finally broke the silence. "We'll monitor them closely. No touching them for now. Grace seems uneasy, and I don't want to stress her further." Maria nodded, but her eyes lingered on the tiny creatures. Their furs shimmered oddly under the warm light, almost metallic in tone. One of them twitched its paw, and for a split second its movement seemed too precise, too coordinated for a newborn. Maria swallowed hard. "They're not crying," she whispered. Dr. Harris's face was pale as he looked at her. "I know," he said softly, "and I think that's what worries me most." The miracle of life had arrived, but it came wrapped in silence. And silence had never felt so wrong. Dr. Harris spent the next several minutes in complete concentration. The shelter lights hummed faintly above him as he leaned closer, his gloved fingers trembling with every movement. The newborns lay side by side, their tiny chests rising and falling in mechanical precision. At first glance, they looked like puppies, small, fragile, helpless. But the longer he observed, the clearer it became. Something wasn't right. Maria stood nearby, clutching a towel in her hands, unable to look away. "They're beautiful," she said softly, trying to break the tension. But her voice faltered when one of the newborns lifted its head, far too early for its age, and turned toward her. Its eyes were open, not milky blue like a newborn's, but deep amber, sharp and alert. Maria gasped. "Doctor!" "Their eyes—" "I see it," Dr. Harris said quietly. His mind raced to find a rational explanation. Neonatal reflex, perhaps? Some rare genetic anomaly? But then the smallest one shifted, letting out a sound. Soft and distorted, not a whimper, but something closer to a hum, low and vibrating. Grace immediately growled, standing protectively over her litter, her body tense. "Easy, girl," Dr. Harris murmured again, slowly backing away. He noticed now the faint shimmer on the newborn's fur, a subtle sheen that glinted under the light like metallic dust. Their skin temperature was unusually warm, warmer than any pup he'd ever handled. He checked the thermometer twice, certain it was an error, but both readings came back the same. Maria finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Are they sick?" The vet hesitated. "No fever, no infection signs? Their vitals are stable." He trailed off, staring at the readings on his monitor. "Too stable," he whispered to himself. The rhythm of their hearts, he could see it on the screen, was synchronized perfectly. Every beat identical, every breath matched. It was unnerving. Grace whined again, nosing one of the newborns closer to her chest, wrapping her body protectively around them. Her eyes darted toward Dr. Harris as if warning him to stay back. For a moment, he wondered if she understood more than any human in the room. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted finally, removing his gloves. "These aren't normal puppies?" The words hung heavy in the air. Volunteers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves. One muttered, Maybe they're mixed with something wild. Another asked, "Do we report this?" Dr. Harris straightened slowly. "No," he said firmly. "Not yet. We need to observe. Document everything. No social media, no photos." "Understood." His tone left no room for debate. Maria nodded, her heart pounding. She could still feel the weight of those newborn eyes staring through her. As Dr. Harris turned off the light and stepped out of the room, he looked back one last time. Grace's gaze followed him, calm but fierce. The soft hum returned, faint but distinct. And in that dim shelter room, beneath the mother's watchful eyes, the mystery had only just begun. By morning, whispers had spread through every corner of Haven Paws. What started as curiosity turned into unease. Volunteers moved more quietly than usual, glancing nervously toward Grace's pen as if afraid to get too close. No one had slept well. The images from last night, the silent newborns, the eerie synchronized breathing, the faint metallic glimmer of their fur, played again and again in their minds. Maria tried to maintain normalcy. She greeted visitors, fed the other dogs, and kept her smile steady. But inside, her stomach was tight with worry. Every time she walked past Grace's pen, she felt those amber eyes watching her, not just from the mother, but from the tiny shapes beside her. They didn't behave like ordinary pups. They didn't squirm for warmth or mewl for milk. They simply stayed close to each other, breathing as one, almost as if communicating silently. Dr. Harris said not to talk about it, one volunteer whispered as they mopped the floor. But what if someone already has? Someone had. By noon, a blurry photo appeared on social media, a grainy image of Grace and her litter taken secretly from a phone. The caption read, "Mutant puppies born at Haven Paws." Within hours, the shelter's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters called. Curious locals showed up, pressing against the glass windows, demanding to see the mystery litter. Maria's heart sank as she watched the crowd gather outside. She knew what curiosity could turn into: fear, speculation, and chaos. Dr. Harris arrived, his face grim. "Shut down public access," he ordered. "No visits, no adoptions until we figure out what's happening." His calm professionalism barely masked the tension in his voice. "If this spreads, we'll have more than reporters to worry about." The volunteers scrambled to follow orders, locking gates and turning away onlookers. Inside, Grace growled at every unfamiliar sound, her maternal instincts on high alert. Even the slightest approach sent her body tensing, her eyes fierce and unblinking. Maria stayed by her side through the chaos, speaking softly through the bars. "It's okay, girl. We'll keep you safe." But she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The world outside was buzzing, and the quiet sanctuary of Haven Paws no longer felt safe. As evening fell, the shelter lights dimmed. The once bustling room stood eerily still. From Grace's pen came a faint hum again, a vibration so low it made the metal bars tremble. Maria froze. She turned toward Dr. Harris. "So did you hear that?" He nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Yes," he whispered. "And whatever this is, it's not over yet." That night, long after the shelter had closed and the last volunteer had gone home, Dr. Harris sat alone in his small office. The hum of the fluorescent light above him was the only sound, steady and hollow. His desk was cluttered with files, syringes, test tubes, and a small portable microscope. On the counter beside him lay 3 tiny vials, each containing a drop of blood he'd carefully collected from Grace's newborns. He shouldn't have done it without permission, but he needed answers. He took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses, and placed a sample slide under the lens. The image sharpened into focus and his stomach tightened. The blood cells looked off, too uniform. Their structure didn't match canine DNA. He blinked, thinking it was an error. He recalibrated, tried again, even switched to another sample. The same result. Perfectly identical cell shapes like they'd been manufactured. Dr. Harris leaned back, staring at the monitor in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "This can't be natural." He ran a quick comparison with archived canine data on his laptop. The computer processed the results, a soft beep marking completion. His eyes darted to the screen, a 42% genetic deviation from standard canine markers. His mind raced. 42%? That's not mutation. That's manipulation. He rubbed his temples, memories flashing from earlier that week. The faded, tattoo-like marking behind Grace's ear, her flinching at metallic noises, her untraceable origins. It all fit too neatly to ignore. But who would experiment on a German Shepherd, and why? Unable to contain his unease, he opened his notebook and began writing. Grace, possible subject of genetic testing. Litter exhibits synchronized breathing. Premature eye development, rapid neural response. Possible cross-species engineering? Must confirm. As the clock ticked past midnight, the shelter creaked under the cold wind. Dr. Harris looked toward the hallway. Grace's pen was visible from his office through a narrow window. Even from here he could see her silhouette, still awake, still watching. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting something that looked far too aware. He turned back to his microscope, switching to a thermal scanner. The newborn cells responded to heat in unnatural ways, rapid regeneration, excessive stability. They're adapting, he murmured, like they were designed to survive anything. A chill ran through him. Suddenly his office computer pinged. A pop-up appeared on screen. Unauthorized network detected. He froze. He wasn't even connected to Wi-Fi. Then another message flashed briefly across the screen. One line of text before disappearing completely. Stop looking. His hands went cold. He unplugged the laptop immediately, heart pounding. He stood up, scanning the dark corners of the room, every sound amplified by his nerves. The shelter felt different now, less like a place of safety and more like a place being watched. He gathered the blood samples, sealing them in a metal case. He'd take them to his private lab first thing in the morning, somewhere off record away from prying eyes. Before locking up, he walked to Grace's pen one last time. She was lying still, her eyes half closed, but as he approached, her head lifted. For a fleeting moment, he thought he heard it again. That faint hum like a soft vibration rising from her litter. Dr. Harris whispered to himself, "What have they done to you?" And in that cold silence, Grace blinked slowly, almost as if she understood. The following morning, the shelter felt unusually tense. Even the dogs in the other pens seemed unsettled, whining softly, pacing in circles, their instincts picking up what humans couldn't understand. The moment Dr. Harris stepped inside, Grace's growl cut through the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, warning, deliberate. She stood between him and her litter, head low, eyes fierce, tail stiff. Maria was already there, kneeling a few feet away from the pen. "She hasn't let anyone near since dawn," she whispered. "Not even to clean or feed. Every time I get close, she blocks me." Grace's hackles rose slightly at Maria's movement, then settled again when she stayed still. It was clear. The mother wasn't acting out of fear. She was defending. Dr. Harris crouched slowly, careful not to provoke her. "It's okay, girl," he murmured. "I'm not going to hurt them." But Grace didn't blink. Her gaze tracked his every move with unnerving precision. Even her breathing seemed different, steady, rhythmic, almost matching the subtle hum still faintly present in the air. He reached for a small tray of food. "She has to eat," he said softly. When he pushed the bowl toward her, she didn't move. Instead, one of the newborns stirred beside her, lifting its head, tilting it slightly, watching him. The movement was wrong, too controlled, too focused for something that should still be blind and helpless. Maria caught her breath. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Dr. Harris nodded, his pulse quickening. Grace nudged the newborn back under her chest, her eyes never leaving his face. It wasn't aggression, it was warning. "She's not just protecting them," Dr. Harris muttered quietly. "She's guarding them. Like she knows they're different," Maria frowned. "Different how?" He hesitated. "Their vitals are abnormally high. Their blood is unlike anything I've ever seen. I think she senses something in them, something she recognizes as dangerous or important." Grace let out a low whine then, almost mournful. She rested her muzzle gently against one of the newborns, licking its ear, then looked back at him as if pleading, "Stay away." For a long moment, none of them moved. The air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken understanding. Then, without warning, the newborns shifted again, together, perfectly synchronized. Their tiny paws pressed against each other, their heads turning in the same direction. Maria took a step back. "Oh my God," she whispered. Grace immediately growled, deep and guttural, her body curving protectively around them. The sound reverberated through the room, primal and commanding. Even the other dogs went silent. Dr. Harris's voice dropped to a whisper. She's not just a mother, Maria. She's a guardian. And as he said it, Grace's eyes flicked toward him, softened for only a moment, before returning to that unwavering, vigilant stare. Whatever those newborns were, Grace had made one thing clear. No one would touch them. Not while she was alive. 3 days passed, and the atmosphere inside Haven Paws grew heavier with each sunrise. The world outside had moved on, but inside the shelter walls every minute felt like waiting for something inevitable. Grace's newborns were changing, growing faster than any normal litter should. When Maria arrived early that morning, she froze at the sight before her. "Dr. Harris," she called softly, her voice trembling. "You need to see this." The pups, if they could still be called that, had nearly doubled in size. Their legs were stronger, their coats darker, the once faint metallic sheen now more pronounced. Each one moved with uncanny coordination. They didn't stumble or wobble like newborns. Instead, they walked in perfect rhythm side by side, as if responding to an invisible signal. Dr. Harris stood speechless. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "They were barely opening their eyes 2 days ago." He jotted notes on his clipboard, his handwriting uneven. Accelerated cellular development. Coordinated motor function. No signs of illness. Grace paced around them protectively, occasionally nudging a pup that strayed too far. Her behavior was anxious yet purposeful. It was as if she understood what was happening better than anyone else. When one of the pups let out a soft, vibrating hum, Grace instantly responded with a bark, short, commanding, and the noise stopped. Maria watched in disbelief. "She's teaching them," she whispered. Dr. Harris swallowed hard. "Or controlling them," he said under his breath. Later that day, he recorded a private video log on his phone. Day 3. Subjects exhibit abnormal neural synchronization, possible hive mind behavior. Their eyes now glow faint amber under direct light. Genetic deviation may exceed 50%. Further testing required. He ended the recording, but the unease in his voice lingered in the silence that followed. As dusk settled, Maria noticed something else. "Doctor, look." She pointed to the heat lamp above the pen. The bulbs flickered as if reacting to a static charge. Grace lifted her head sharply, growling low, while the pups turned their gaze toward the light in perfect unison. For a brief second, the flickering intensified, then stopped completely. The silence afterward was suffocating. Dr. Harris slowly exhaled. "They reacted to the current," he whispered. "Like they felt it," Grace barked suddenly, startling them both. She positioned herself between the litter and the humans once again, her body trembling slightly, her eyes fierce. Whatever force was shaping her pups, it was growing stronger, and so was her instinct to defend them. Maria backed away, her heart pounding. "They're changing too fast," she said. Dr. Harris's expression hardened. "No," he replied quietly. "They're evolving." He looked down at his notes, the words blurring before his eyes. Not natural, not accidental. That night, as the shelter fell into uneasy darkness, Grace stayed awake, watching, listening, guarding. And deep within the pen, the faint hum returned, low, steady, and almost alive. The next morning, the air at Haven Paws felt heavy, charged, as if the building itself could sense something about to happen. Dr. Harris hadn't slept all night. The small case of blood samples sat in his passenger seat as he drove to his private laboratory, 30 minutes outside town. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, not even Maria. He needed to be certain before speaking the truth aloud. Inside the sterile lab, he moved with precision. Machines hummed to life, vials clinked softly as he loaded them into the analyzer. His hands trembled, but his focus was razor sharp. He ran Grace's blood first, then the samples from her offspring. The computer began processing, beeps echoing through the quiet room. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the screen. The data began appearing line by line, and with each result his pulse quickened. Grace's DNA, 100% canine, German Shepherd strain, standard health markers. Newborn sample 1, 58% canine DNA, 23% unclassified mammalian. 19% synthetic sequence detected. Newborn sample 2, similar pattern, almost identical. Dr. Harris's throat went dry. "Synthetic?" he muttered. He zoomed in on the genetic sequence. Segments of it were unfamiliar, too perfect, too symmetrical, as if written by a computer. Someone engineered this. He stepped back from the monitor, heart racing. The faint mark behind Grace's ear flashed in his memory, the tattoo-like scar. It wasn't random. It was an identification code. Grace hadn't been abandoned. She had escaped. He scrolled through the database of veterinary and animal research registries, cross-referencing the code pattern he remembered. For several minutes, nothing matched until a restricted file appeared. Project Canis 9. Neural Adaptation and Hybrid Resilience Trials. His hand froze on the mouse. The entry had been wiped clean. Only fragments remaining. Abandoned facility. Unauthorized cross-genetic experiment. Subject containment breach. Grace was the breach. Dr. Harris sank into his chair, realization dawning like a slow, cold wave. Those weren't normal puppies, they were hybrids, designed, built for something more than survival. The synchronized breathing, the shared awareness, the accelerated growth, it all made sense now. Whoever created them wasn't trying to breed dogs. They were trying to create control. He grabbed his phone and called Maria. Lock down the shelter. Don't let anyone in or near Grace's pen. Not the volunteers, not the public. I'll explain everything when I get there. Maria's voice trembled through the line. Doctor, something's happening. His stomach tightened. What do you mean? The pups, they're standing, all of them, like they're waiting for something. Grace won't let anyone close. The lights are flickering again. You need to come back now. He didn't waste a second. The drive back felt endless, headlights cutting through the early dusk. When he arrived, Maria met him at the door, pale and shaken. It's them, she whispered. They've been moving together like they're responding to sounds we can't hear. Dr. Harris rushed to the pen. Grace stood in front of her litter, her body tense, hackles raised. Behind her, the pups moved in eerie unison, eyes glowing faintly under the dim light. The hum was back, louder now, vibrating through the floor. He took one step closer, whispering, Grace, please. For the first time, she didn't growl. She looked at him, truly looked, and there was something in her eyes that broke his heart. Understanding, sadness, and then she turned toward her litter and pressed her muzzle gently against the smallest one. As if saying goodbye, Dr. Harris whispered to himself. They're not just dogs. The monitor beside him flickered again, heart rates, brain waves, all in perfect sync. They're a single consciousness. And with that realization, he understood the truth. Grace hadn't been protecting her litter from the world. She had been protecting the world from them. Dr. Harris couldn't shake the image of the file name from his mind. Project Canis 9. The moment he reached his office, he locked the door, turned off the lights, and opened his old laptop, one not connected to any network. If Grace had come from that warehouse district, there might still be evidence there. He inserted a flash drive containing the remnants of the government research database he'd managed to copy. His fingers trembled as the file decrypted. The first image appeared, a dimly lit laboratory. Rows of metal kennels, machines wired into IV drips, and surgical lamps hanging above tables. Each photo had a tag beneath it. Phase 1, Cognitive Synchronization. Then another. Phase 2, Accelerated Evolution. But the one that made his blood run cold read, Phase 3, Neural Link Integration. Subject GS09, Grace. He opened a video file next. The footage was grainy, timestamped 2 years ago. A younger version of Grace lay strapped to a table, wires connected to her spine and skull. Scientists in hazmat suits moved around her, their faces hidden behind tinted visors. A voice narrated coldly over the intercom. Subject GS09 demonstrates remarkable cognitive receptivity. Neural frequencies align within acceptable range. Initiate embryo transfer sequence. Dr. Harris felt sick. Embryo transfer. She hadn't conceived naturally. The litter inside her had been implanted. The next few seconds of the footage were chaos. Grace began thrashing, her body reacting violently as alarms blared. A scientist shouted, "She's rejecting the control implant." Another voice yelled, "Sedate her, now!" But before they could, Grace broke free, ripping through the straps with terrifying strength. The camera shook violently as one of the researchers screamed. The last thing visible was Grace crashing through a metal door, the camera falling, static filling the screen. Dr. Harris sat frozen, his hands gripping the desk. "She escaped," he whispered. "She's been running ever since." He clicked through the remaining documents. facility blueprints, research notes, termination orders. The project had been officially shut down after the escape, but some lines were redacted in black. One fragment, however, stood out in unblurred text. If subject GS09 produces offspring, containment protocol is mandatory. Hybrid neural link must not mature. He slammed the laptop shut, his heart hammering in his chest. Containment, he repeated aloud. That meant someone was still watching. Someone who knew she had given birth. Outside, thunder rumbled as rain began to pour, lightning flashing through the shelter windows. Dr. Harris stood and looked out across the parking lot. Through the sheets of rain, 2 black SUVs idled at the far end of the street. No lights, no movement, but he knew. They weren't just passers-by. He whispered to himself, "They've found her." In the dim shelter hallway, Grace lifted her head suddenly, ears twitching. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, as if she, too, could sense it somewhere deep within her. The instinct that had kept her alive all this time awoke once more, and this time, it wouldn't let anyone take her children away. The storm outside raged violently, rain hammering against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the old shelter walls. Maria was in the storage room when she heard it, the sound of tires screeching outside, followed by car doors slamming in unison. Her heart skipped. She rushed to the front window and froze. 2 black SUVs had stopped at the gate just as Dr. Harris had feared. 4 men stepped out, dressed in tactical black gear, their faces hidden beneath caps and visors. No markings, no insignia, but everything about them screamed authority, the kind that didn't need permission. One of them lifted a hand to his earpiece. Within seconds, the shelter's lights flickered and went out. The only illumination came from flashes of lightning. Maria's voice shook. "Doctor, they're here." Dr. Harris didn't hesitate. "Get everyone out through the back now." He ran down the corridor toward Grace's pen. The hallways echoed with his footsteps and the low rumble of thunder outside. When he reached her, Grace was already standing, her body rigid, ears forward, hackles raised. She could smell the threat before anyone else. The pups huddled behind her, but they weren't afraid. They were still, focused. "Grace, listen to me," Dr. Harris whispered urgently, kneeling at the bars. "They're coming for your litter. You have to trust me." The emergency exit alarm blared suddenly. Someone had breached the side door. The heavy thud of boots filled the corridor. Maria shouted, "They're inside!" Dr. Harris's pulse raced. He unlatched the pen, ignoring the warning growl that vibrated through Grace's chest. "Please," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm trying to help you." For a tense moment, Grace didn't move. Then, as the sound of footsteps grew louder, she made her choice. With one swift motion, she leapt forward, nudging the pups toward the back door. They moved with uncanny coordination, sticking close to her heels. The first agent rounded the corner. "Step away from the dog," he barked. Dr. Harris threw his arms wide. "They're not yours to take." Before the man could respond, Grace lunged. Her growl erupted like thunder itself, teeth flashing as she drove him back. Another agent raised a tranquilizer rifle, but before he could aim, the lights flickered violently, then exploded into sparks. Every bulb shattered at once. Maria screamed. "What's happening?" The pups had begun to hum again, that strange low vibration filling the air. The metallic sound intensified, shaking the windows, vibrating through the walls. The men stumbled, disoriented, clutching their ears as their radios crackled with static. Grace barked once, loud, commanding, and the sound cut off instantly. The humming stopped. Silence returned, heavy and eerie. "Go," Dr. Harris shouted, ushering them toward the rear exit. Grace bolted forward, the pups following her like shadows. Maria held the door open as rain poured in, soaking her clothes. The agents recovered, one of them shouting, "Contain the subjects." But by then it was too late. Grace and her litter vanished into the storm, their silhouettes swallowed by the downpour. Dr. Harris stood at the doorway, breathless, drenched, and trembling. One of the men approached, gun lowered. "You just made a huge mistake, Doctor." He met the man's gaze, unflinching. "No," he said quietly. "I saved them." The man hesitated, then motioned to his team. "We'll find them." As the black SUVs roared away into the stormy night, Maria turned to Dr. Harris. "Where will they go?" He looked out into the darkness, the rain masking his tears. "Somewhere they can't be controlled," he said softly. "Somewhere they can be free." Lightning flashed again, and for an instant out in the distance Grace's silhouette appeared, running through the rain, her pups close behind. Then she was gone. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the world drenched and eerily quiet. The shelter was a wreck, shattered glass on the floor, broken light fixtures hanging like ghosts, and muddy footprints trailing from every direction. The chaos of the night felt almost unreal, yet the silence that followed carried a different kind of weight. Loss. Grace and her litter were gone. Dr. Harris stood by the open doorway, rainwater dripping from the roof above him. He hadn't slept. His clothes were still damp, his eyes red from exhaustion. Maria approached slowly, holding a towel and a cup of coffee. "You did what you had to do," she said softly. He shook his head. "No. I released something into the world that I don't fully understand." She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You saved a mother and her children. Isn't that what matters?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze drifted to the forest beyond the fence, where the trees swayed gently in the morning wind. Somewhere out there, Grace was running, free, wild, and fiercely protective. He imagined her leading her pups through the underbrush, guiding them toward safety. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a family fleeing danger. It was something far greater, something that couldn't be contained by fences or laws. A sudden sound pulled him from his thoughts, a faint bark in the distance. It was low and distinct, almost like a farewell. Maria's eyes widened. "Was that?" He nodded slowly. "Grace." They stepped outside, boots sinking into the wet ground. The air smelled of pine and rain. For a brief moment, through the morning mist, Dr. Harris saw movement among the trees. A large shadow, graceful and strong, with several smaller shapes close behind. Grace paused at the tree line, her head held high. Their eyes met across the distance, man and creature. Two beings who understood each other without words. Dr. Harris whispered, "You don't have to run anymore." Grace blinked once, as if in acknowledgement. Then, without a sound, she turned and disappeared into the forest, her litter following in perfect rhythm. Maria exhaled shakily. "Do you think we'll ever see her again?" Dr. Harris smiled faintly, though his heart ached. "I hope not," he said quietly. "If we do, it means she's still being hunted." They stood there for a long time, watching the trees sway. The shelter behind them was broken, but somehow it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning, the world's first morning with something extraordinary living quietly within it. Dr. Harris turned back toward the shelter, whispering to himself, "Run far, Grace, and keep them safe." And somewhere deep in the forest, a soft hum echoed in response, faint, distant, yet alive, as the dawn light broke through the trees. 6 months had passed since that night, yet the memory still clung to Dr. Harris like a shadow that refused to fade. Havenpaw's shelter had been repaired, new glass, new lights, a fresh coat of paint, but beneath its quiet exterior lingered an unspoken scar. The volunteers had moved on, but Maria and Dr. Harris never truly did. Every night when the last dog was fed and the lights dimmed, both of them found their thoughts wandering back to Grace. Dr. Harris often told himself she was safe, deep in the woods, far from the world that had tried to own her. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at him. He'd catch himself staring at the tree line beyond the parking lot, half expecting to see her amber eyes glinting in the dark. But she never came back. Not once, until one late afternoon. Maria was locking the front gate when she heard it, the soft crunch of gravel behind her. She turned, startled, and froze. Standing at the edge of the lot was a young German shepherd, tall, strong. Its coat shimmered faintly in the dying sunlight, that same strange metallic sheen she could never forget. Its eyes, a deep amber, intelligent, studied her calmly. "Doctor," she called, her voice trembling. "You need to see this." Dr. Harris rushed out, his heart pounding. When his gaze fell on the dog, he stopped cold. The resemblance was undeniable. The markings, the fur, the way it stood, proud, alert, aware. "It can't be," he whispered. The shepherd didn't bark. It simply watched him, then stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Around its neck hung a GPS collar, blinking faintly, too advanced to be stray equipment. Dr. Harris crouched down, speaking softly. "You're one of them, aren't you?" The dog tilted its head, then walked forward and dropped something at his feet. A small metal tag, weathered and scratched. He picked it up and turned it over. The engraving made his chest tighten. It read, "Grace GSU09, Maria covered her mouth. She's alive. Dr. Harris looked up, but the shepherd was already backing away. It paused once, meeting his eyes again, and for a heartbeat he swore he saw something behind those eyes. Recognition. Connection. Tell her, he whispered, voice breaking. She kept her promise. The shepherd gave one short, soft bark, then turned and disappeared into the trees. As dusk fell, the forest grew quiet again. Dr. Harris stood there, holding the tag tightly in his palm, a faint smile breaking through his tears. Grace was gone, but her legacy was alive. The sun had fully set by the time Dr. Harris returned inside. The shelter was quiet again, filled only with the soft rustle of sleeping dogs and the hum of the ceiling fans. Yet tonight the silence didn't feel heavy, it felt peaceful. He sat at his desk, the small metal tag resting beside his hand. The name Grace, GS09, gleamed faintly under the lamp's glow, a symbol of everything that had begun in fear but ended in freedom. Maria entered softly, holding 2 cups of tea. "You think she'll ever come back?" she asked. Dr. Harris shook his head gently. "No," he said. "Grace was never meant to live in cages. She belongs to the world now. Somewhere out there she's teaching her litter how to survive, how to stay unseen." He smiled faintly. "Maybe even how to trust again." They sat in quiet reflection, the warm light spilling across the floor. For the first time in months, the shelter didn't feel haunted. It felt watched over, protected by something unseen but deeply present. Maria broke the silence. "Do you ever think they'll be found?" Dr. Harris looked out the window toward the dark forest beyond. "I hope not," he said. "If the world ever sees them again, it'll be because they want to be seen. And by then, I think they'll decide what kind of world deserves them." He turned the tag over in his hand one last time, whispering softly, "You did it, Grace. You gave them a chance." Outside, a breeze stirred the trees, carrying with it a faint, distant sound and a single bark, low and calm, echoing through the night. Maria smiled. "That's her," she whispered. Dr. Harris nodded. "Always watching." He placed the tag inside a small glass case on the desk, labeling it with a simple note, "In honor of Grace and the mother who defied creation." Then he switched off the light, leaving the shelter bathed in soft moonlight. As the camera pans out, the shelter glowing faintly beneath the stars, the faint sound of synchronized breathing fades in, rhythmic and steady just like before. And then, over the final frame, sometimes what we fear most is born to protect us. If you were moved by Grace's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us how loyalty, love, and courage can come from the most unexpected places. Stay tuned, more incredible tales await.